Overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
Something unusual began unfolding inside America's most important aerospace corridors long before today's headlines appeared. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't a single decision. It was a sequence of quiet signals that, when viewed together, painted a troubling picture. A leadership shakeup at Boeing, disrupted deliveries, rising tension inside factories where workers suddenly found themselves without contracts, and overseas, governments making decisions that hinted at a deeper realignment. By the time Washington woke up to the story, the shift was already underway. At the center of it all stood Boeing, a company long treated as a pillar of American industrial strength. For decades, its factories symbolized technical dominance, stable employment, and national pride. Entire communities were built around the assumption that Boeing's production lines would continue humming inside U.S. borders. But that assumption has started to crack. What looked like routine corporate turbulence has now escalated into something far more consequential. Reports from China ordering airlines to pause Boeing deliveries sent a jolt through global markets. Inside the United States, machinists in key facilities were still operating without labor agreements, uncertain about their futures as negotiations stalled. Executives watched costs rise, workers watched hours shrink, and beneath the surface, suppliers and partners began asking a dangerous question. How reliable is the American aerospace environment going forward? The ripple didn't stop at U.S. borders. Canadian aerospace firms, many of them longtime subcontractors quietly operating in the background, suddenly found themselves in a very different position. Contracts once assumed to be locked into American facilities were being reconsidered. Negotiations that once seemed symbolic began carrying real weight. And while much of Washington remained focused on domestic political battles, Canada was executing a strategy years in the making. This moment did not arrive by accident. Behind closed doors, Canadian firms had spent years strengthening their capabilities, investing in advanced manufacturing, and aligning themselves with global partners who valued stability over rhetoric. While American policy debates grew louder and more polarized, Canada's approach stayed methodical: build capacity, reduce exposure to trade shocks, offer predictability. When the opening appeared, they were ready. The shift became impossible to ignore when Ottawa confirmed a wave of aerospace agreements that would anchor high-value work north of the border. These were not peripheral tasks. They involved core functions: assembly, systems integration, long-term maintenance, areas that define where expertise and power accumulate. Billions of dollars in projected activity would now flow into Quebec and Ontario, supporting skilled jobs and long-term industrial growth. For Boeing, the decision reflected cold arithmetic. Tariffs, political uncertainty, and labor instability had transformed the cost structure of U.S.-based production. Canada, by contrast, offered a pathway around trade barriers, predictable regulatory conditions, and government-backed investment frameworks. The choice wasn't ideological, it was strategic, and that reality landed hard in Washington. The political fallout was immediate. Donald Trump, who had spent months projecting confidence in his trade strategy, responded with visible frustration. His administration had framed tariffs as a shield, one that would lock down American jobs and force companies to deepen their domestic commitments. The aerospace sector was supposed to be a showcase of that philosophy. Instead, one of its crown jewels was redirecting critical work abroad. The contradiction was difficult to explain away. On the campaign trail, Trump continued to promise protection for manufacturing communities that depend on long production cycles and stable supply chains. But the headlines told a different story. While speeches emphasized strength and control, reality revealed vulnerability. A policy designed to keep industry at home was now accelerating decisions to move key operations elsewhere. For American workers, the implications felt immediate and personal. In states where aerospace employment underpins local economies, uncertainty spread quickly. Union leaders warned that today's contracts could become tomorrow's layoffs. Economists caution that once high-value work migrates, it rarely returns. The knowledge, the tooling, and the institutional memory follow the investment. Canada's leaders, meanwhile, framed the development as validation. Years of public investment, workforce training, and industrial planning were finally paying off. In Montreal and Toronto, officials spoke openly about building a globally competitive aerospace ecosystem, one that no longer played a secondary role to American firms, but competed directly for the most sophisticated projects. The contrast between the two narratives could not have been sharper. South of the border, anxiety and political blame dominated the conversation. North of it, confidence and long-term planning took center stage. Social media amplified the divide, with images of Canadian engineers celebrating new projects circulating alongside footage of American workers questioning their futures. Analysts were quick to point out that this wasn't just about Boeing. The aerospace industry sits at the intersection of national security, advanced manufacturing, and global trade. Decisions made here ripple outward, influencing supplier networks, research institutions, and geopolitical influence. When a company of Boeing's stature shifts its center of gravity, competitors take notice. Airbus and emerging Asian manufacturers are watching closely. If trade barriers continue to complicate U.S. operations, opportunities open elsewhere. Supply chains adapt faster than politics. And once alternative hubs prove reliable, they become permanent fixtures in the global landscape. The episode has also reignited debate over the broader trade strategy guiding U.S. policy. Supporters argue that short-term disruption is the price of long-term independence. Critics counter that modern industries cannot be walled off without consequences. Aerospace manufacturing depends on precision timing, cross-border collaboration, and cost predictability. Remove any one of those elements, and companies will seek solutions beyond national borders. Inside Congress, concern is growing across party lines. Lawmakers from aerospace-heavy districts understand what is at stake. Communities that endured previous waves of industrial decline recognize the pattern. Uncertainty first, reduced investment next, and eventual contraction. The fear is not hypothetical. It is rooted in lived experience. As the 2025 election cycle accelerates, the symbolism of Boeing's move carries political weight. Trump's identity has been built around restoring American industrial dominance. But dominance requires more than barriers. It requires environments where companies can plan decades ahead without fear of sudden policy shifts. The current moment has raised uncomfortable questions about whether that environment still exists. For Canada, the shift represents more than economic gain. It signals a repositioning within North American trade dynamics. No longer content to operate as a junior partner, Canada is asserting itself as a destination for advanced manufacturing and high-value industrial work. That confidence is reshaping relationships that once seemed fixed. What unfolds next will matter far beyond this single decision. Other corporations are studying the outcome closely. If Boeing's strategy proves sustainable, it may encourage similar recalculations across industries, from defense to energy to advanced technology. The message is clear: stability attracts investment. Volatility drives it away. Inside the United States, the debate remains unresolved. Some advisors urge adjustments, targeted incentives, tariff revisions, renewed labor stability to slow the outflow of investment. Others insist the current path must be held to prove resolve. The tension reflects a deeper uncertainty about how America competes in an interconnected world. What is undeniable is that a line has been crossed. The aerospace industry, once assumed immune to political miscalculation, has become a case study in unintended consequences. A strategy meant to protect has instead exposed fragility, and a neighboring country, long viewed as a supporting player, has stepped confidently into a larger role. As global markets digest the implications, one reality stands out. Industrial power does not disappear overnight. It shifts quietly, contract by contract, decision by decision. By the time the full impact is visible, the balance has already changed. The question now facing Washington is whether it recognizes that shift in time, or whether this moment will be remembered as the point when control slipped away.